Hi everybody, my name is Mike Taylor and I am going to make a short video that describes some of the archaeology and some of the observations that we made. We being a group of people from the Wilvercote Port Meadow Wombles page. We made last Sunday, it being towards the end of August 2022. Big drought, lots of earthworks popping up. So the first thing I'm going to point out to you is this rather intriguing squarish looking structure just here. It's square with a bit of a bend in it. We're towards the end of the runway of the old aerodrome, so I think it might be associated with that. But this is the area that we're more interested in. If you look at the Ordnance Survey map, you'll see that there's an area called Blackjack's Hole, and this is that area. Going back to the sort of the 19th century, the maps of the time show a water ditch or an inlet coming from the south and heading up, and photographs in the 1940s clearly show willow trees here as well. It's quite a distinct area. It might be geological, it might be part geological, partly artificial, not really sure. And Julian very kindly took the time to have part of it mowed so we could see what else might be going on under the hood, as it were. But you can see there's quite a clear ditch just to the right of us, and it's very green with some very succulent looking plants in it, and it's quite a different area from the area of the meadow just to the left. Now, the first feature that I wanted to point out is this rather spectacular ditch that cuts right across the meadow. Now, those of you who come here, you'll know that there are 2 or 3 of these structures like that. And in fact, going over there, perhaps 50 metres at the end of where the rooks are, there's a nice sort of area which is raised, which cuts across the ditch, offering a dry walkway. It's not very straight, it's very bendy, and it sort of peters out when we get to the area of, more or less where this ditch is. So it's possible that this long ditch used to drain into this other ditch, which is just where my dog is, just where that gentleman's running, and cuts off the corner of Port Meadow, where we can see there are lots of geese feeding. So when we were here last Sunday, I was here with Catherine from Lower Wilvercote and Rachel from Kidlington, formerly of Jericho, and Anna from Summertown and Matt from Summertown and Podrick from Jericho, I think. And we spent a lovely day out here looking at the various field markings around that are popping up in this incredibly dry summer. One of the things that Rachel pointed out is that ignoring the mowing lines, because that's very fresh, first time it's been topped this summer, inside the ditch we've got these lateral markings of green foliage there, suggesting that there are wetter areas that my dog's happily exploring inside that ditch. And actually, if we were to hop up onto there, which I'm not going to do right now, there are a number of lumps and bumps and lateral features. What it's certainly not is a very wet area. It's actually quite a dry area on top of there, but it's surrounded by this ditch, and you can sort of see that ditch there sweeping off down there. There's this raised section in the middle, and on the other side we've got a more damp area. So it's a really interesting area. I'm not sure what we're looking at. It could be, I don't know, it could be geological. It's probably geological, but at the same time it might be one of those things that people have used. Perhaps they were draining this area, which we think was a farming area, draining this area into the ditch. Maybe there are fish traps there. Maybe that's what we're looking at, where we see those lateral markings in the ditch. But this is the area that really kind of popped out. Now, I reckon that line, that track we see over there, that very prominent one, may be what's left of the old horse racing circuit. It's really straight. It's quite unlike many of the other tracks. It's nice and wide and straight. And at the other end, getting down towards the boatyard, that looks like there was some kind of surfacing going on there, but that might be modern, of course. So here we are. We're entering into this area, which is the thing that I first started noticing. So if you want to come and have a look at this, can I suggest that you do so in the next couple of weeks? Because as soon as we start getting any rain, all of this is going to green up. And for the most part, these markings haven't been visible for about 60 or 70 years. So they're not going to be very likely. You can trace them. Over there, just near where those rooks are, you can see a green line, and Anna and Matt have traced these out. I've got screenshots of where they go to. And over there where the birds are, there are lots of little intersections of very straight lines. Could be describing edge boundaries or stockade boundaries, something like that. Now, when I first came here, this area here had quite a clear rectangular shape in the middle out of those thistles, but it's got a little bit drier since then, and it's stopped being quite as clear as it was. So this is the first thing that I really wanted to talk about, because we have looked at this in some detail. So I think it's pretty clear. If we go up here, we can see where the lines are in the green there. So going along there, up there behind that, near that gentleman, and across down there. So we've got a squarish feature there. And from our survey, what we found was that there are lumps and bumps in there that sort of correspond to the corners of this. It's suggestive perhaps of, I mean, should I say demolition rubble? Possibly. And in the middle, again, we've got a selection of lumps and bumps that might be associated with support, perhaps for a roof or some other structure. And maybe we can see the signs of a little bit of a gate there. And just for a little bit more clarity, there's another one of those boundary markers going up there. Now, if that is the field, if that is the track of the horse racing circuit, that's 16th, 17th century, and it cuts through the boundary ditch. So our boundary ditch then, as defined by that line of thistles, would be older than that racetrack, if that's what that racetrack is. So let's move out of this quadrilateral, and we've got another ditch. You can feel it in your feet. It's really interesting. If you just sort of walk around it, you can feel that there's a green line there, there's a ditch there going up there, separating out that one quadrilateral, that one square shape there, with what looks like another square shape here. And again, lots of lumps and bumps. These could be associated with horses scraping holes. You can see that they do that. That's over there. Again, these lines, and you can see a more distant horizontal green line cutting there, they're cutting through that track, which may or may not be the racetrack. And again, so suggesting that those square shapes, those green ditch boundaries, are older than the 16th, 17th century racetrack, if that's what it is. And again, we can see lots of ditches along here. And again, our careful survey of these shapes suggests that there is more organisation in these lumps and bumps than it appears. It's not just random. And then we start getting into a very different area, and I'm going to just pick this one shape. And again, there are various little lines here, but this is a really interesting shape. So very different, and I thought this was going to be maybe a fish pond or something like that, but it's not really right for that, for lots of reasons. It's very, very big for a start, and we seem to have this sort of entrance here. I mean, we can see, hopefully this will show, we've got where Mila is over there, we've got this green line going around, it curves around, comes back. Bit of a shape going on here, an entrance in their possible sort of interior markings there. So we've been puzzling about what these might be. Back in the 1940s, 1950s, they were spotted by an aircraft, and someone assumed that they were roundhouses, Iron Age roundhouses. They're not. They're too big. The ditches are really wrong, and they're not really organised either. There are lots of roundhouses on Port Meadow. Other posts you will see one that I've got here. It's a little bit faded. There's another circle here. You can sort of see a horseshoe shape, and there's another one here, and believe it or not, there's another one just here. You can see sort of the left-hand side. You can see little bits of the outside of it. And then interesting, we've got a very, very straight line after that. Now, and I think that there's another round site, another round marking over there. So I'm not sure how many that is. That's a fair few. And while we were working, we were visited by a pair of archaeologists, and we started talking about it. And I said, well, we're struggling to make sense of what these might be in terms of, what might be a medieval farmstead, which is what we think this area is, with lots of field boundaries. And he said, well, why do you think it's medieval? And I said, well, I don't know really, because I'm an idiot. And he said, well, I just left it like that. And then something clicked. Now, as you know, this is Blackjack's Hole, this area. And there's only one other feature which is named on Port Meadow, and that's Round Hill over there. Round Hill is at least one Bronze Age tumulus, I should say, probably more of them. And over there, over at Whiteham, lots and lots of other earthworks which probably are Bronze Age tumuli. So what we reckon this is a long line of not one, but two, not three, not maybe four, maybe five Bronze Age tumuli that have been probably washed away by floods, or maybe quarried away. But they would have been an incredibly impressive monument. They're about the right size for Bronze Age tumuli. They're a similar size to Round Hill over there, which is aged and dug. And they're in the right kind of place, which is next to water. The Bronze Age people were very fond of these large ceremonial, or not ceremonial, let's not say that, these large organisations. I've got to say that this is not an observation without controversy. Catherine in particular had some questions about why we would want to identify everything as being a tumuli, and I think she's probably right. It just seems to be a very convenient way of thinking about things. So there's a couple of other things that I wanted to talk to you about, to mention. So if behind us is this medieval farmstead, bear in mind we've got the perch over there. They claim that there's been a pub there for 900 years. Just behind me to the right we have the nunnery. That's medieval. So this is a very rich medieval site, and also the whole area was known as Godstow in the medieval period, which means God's area, God's space. So let's just stop here. I'm standing on a causeway. It's about a metre higher than the rest of Port Meadow. We've got a really tidy ditch running along the left. For those of you who don't know Port Meadow, this area floods quite frequently, and in fact the river is not only low for this time of the year, it's also low because there's a big weir behind us that hasn't always been there. So it would have been wetter. And here we are walking along a causeway. Now, interestingly enough, this isn't the only causeway on the meadow. There's another one over on the other side, and we've got this ditch on the left-hand side. So, clear evidence that at some stage people have built this. Now, it may be a flood defence, it may be a causeway, it might be both. And at some stage, it looks like people have come along. This is Podrick's observation. And have scraped holes in this causeway. Now, I reckon it might be because that ditch has stopped working to drain the land, and this causeway wasn't being used so much, so they've knocked holes in it to drain the water. So here's one of those holes, going into it, and then back up the other side. There's quite a few of these, quite a few on the other side, on the causeway over there, which on the other side of the meadow, which may or may not be helpful for my hypothesis. But again, we've got this area on the right hand side, walking south towards Oxford, ditch on the left hand side, and it curls away towards the river down here. I'm not sure whether it fades out and keeps going, or whether there's a possible ford here. Now, during our time here, Matt came down here and said, what did I make of those lines? I'm not an expert. I don't know what to make of those lines. They're spaced about 2 meters apart. Now, normally, I guess people would look at that and go, oh, are those plough marks? But they're a bit close for plough marks. So I'm not at all sure. They might be there to drain the land. Not absolutely sure. It's interesting that they run parallel with the river, sort of, although they do curve, as you can see. And what's possibly even more interesting is over on the other side, just underneath those trees, where there's this other causeway, we get similar markings, but running east to west rather than north to south, which is what these do. I guess the other thing that's worthwhile pointing out is that these plough marks, they get shorter and shorter as they come towards the causeway that I'm walking on. And it seems to me, Matt and Catherine, that the causeway sits on top of them, which might suggest that those lines are older than the causeway, or it might just mean that someone's come along in relatively recent times and has drained the land, and over time, with flooding, with lots of water, the causeway has sort of sloughed off and filled in, and it's hiding them. Something like geophys would help us understand the exact context of this. So I'm now down at the end of the feature. You can see behind me how that area to the left of me with all the weeds in it, sitting inside a slightly lower ditch, is coming down towards the river, and how the causeway, Mila's sort of just on the edge of the causeway, is curling towards the riverbank and fading out and pointing towards the perch, where we know that there's been something for 900 odd years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post this on Facebook tomorrow. Hopefully I'm going to come here and record with my drone so you get an aerial view of it. Thank you very much for listening. Enjoy.